you, Chairman. I want to thank our panelists for being here today. We've spent tens of billions of dollars on important infrastructure investments, particularly broadband funding in recent years, spanning various federal agencies. And this committee has a really important oversight role. I commend the chairman for his leadership in this effort. The infrastructure bill alone made a $65 billion investment in broadband deployment and adoption and established, as has been noted, a roughly $42.5 billion broadband grant program at the NTIA. I want to ask a couple of questions of Mr. Powell and Mr. Spalter, please. You represent many member companies who would likely consider participating in the BEAD program, this grant program to states. Do your members want to participate in the BEAD program, and how is your industry prepared for this new funding? And perhaps you could touch on any regulations associated with the requirements of the BEAD program or other government broadband programs that are of particular focus to your members.
Let me begin, Senator, and thank you for the question. Our members are, if I could use this phrase, loaded for bear to be able to actually deploy these BEAD dollars responsibly, accountably, quickly, and effectively. It is our members who have the financial, technical, operational, and experiential wherewithal to be able to best apply these funds and put them to their best and highest uses. We are anticipating broad participation in the BEAD program. We are concerned, however, that there are unintended consequences of the IIJA that need to be dealt with squarely, including provisions that I don't believe Congress had intended to be included in the BEAD program or its implementation, such things as Davis-Bacon, the middle-class subsidy that has been suggested. We need to together collectively deal with these issues if we're going to foster the kinds of deep participation that we want and that our members would very much like to be able to achieve.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
I would just add the tenor of your question gets at something I think is not fully appreciated. This is a massive, complex undertaking for an ISP. You have teams dedicated, first of all, just digesting the rules, the conditions, the parameters, the markets that are going to be available, which ones are not going to be available, how is it going to be funded, where are the matching funds coming from, how do we do this in an inflationary environment that might lead to recession, how do we do this in a supply chain constrained environment, how do you do this in a skilled labor shortage environment, what are the ways to migrate around those things?
Right.
This is why the delicacy of unnecessary regulatory mandates could really derail the incentive to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will we'll note whatever regulations or provisions you think are already perhaps unintentional or not reflective of the intent of Congress as a whole. On an ongoing basis, we'll want to be attentive to some friction that will be associated with implementation, I'm sure, at various points. One question to, again, each of you, Mr. Powell and Mr. Spalter, pertaining to the digital divide, something we in Congress have indicated that we want to close for some period of time. But what does closing the digital divide mean to you? And do you believe that we will officially, through this spending and implementation initiative, be able to close the digital divide after tens of billions of dollars? Because frankly, this was the promise of the broadband investments, which was we would make sure there are no unserved, and we would significantly narrow the number of underserved households across the country. I expect inflation, which Mr. Powell mentioned, could have an adverse role on meeting that objective. But what say you, Mr. Salter?
To the question of how do we close the digital divide and what is closure of the digital divide, I think it's been well expressed by the intent of the IIJA itself, which is that when all in America who want access to broadband can have that access at speeds of 120 throughput at least. To get to that promised land, I think, it's tantalizingly close, but it's going to take an all-hands-on-deck effort to make sure that we can, in partnership with our government partners, really machete through a lot of these encumbrances that make our willingness to participate in question because of the various regulatory, permitting, and other challenges that we know are part and parcel, unfortunately, right now of broadband deployment.
Okay, so your answer is basically we hope we can close the digital divide. We all need to be working together and towards that end. But you certainly haven't given me a confident assertion it's going to happen, which is fair. Mr. Powell?
Yeah, I think closing the digital divide is every American, regardless of where they live, whatever their community, has the ability to access high-quality broadband infrastructure at a reasonable rate. That's the historic commitment of the nation to universal service, and when we fully realize that dream, that will be the result. I am more excited and bullish than I've ever been that we have the opportunity to generally close the divide. I've also learned that declaring mission accomplished prematurely is a huge mistake. A lot of this money could be misdirected, inefficiently managed. We've seen that before. I think that the history of that anxiety should produce a much sharper, more vigilant, more better overseen program. If we do that, I think we will be able to celebrate the closing of the digital divide. If not, we'll be wondering 5 years from now what happened.
You have your game face on. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.